what I think happened with Morton, Baker, and McCloskey is that they broke. There is a break in that canyon. If you've ever been down there, you can see it. You can even see it on maps of where the canyon breaks this way and this way. And I really feel like that Morton Baker broke to get away, and there wasn't many chance but for there wasn't any alternative but for them to be shot.
After the murders of Baker, Morton, and McCloskey, the governor of New Mexico, Samuel Axtell, visited Lincoln briefly and declared that Justice of the Peace Wilson and Constable Martinez had no authority to issue warrants and carry them out. And further, the only instruments of law in Lincoln County were Sheriff Brady and Justice Warren Bristol, both Dolan allies. In effect, this declaration officially made the regulators outlaws and murderers. The regulators laid low for the latter part of March. Then on March 31st, they met McSween at the Chisholm Ranch. The next day, 6 regulators would ambush and kill Sheriff Brady. No one knows who suggested this plan. It seems unlikely that McSween, who abhorred violence, would have condoned murder. Then again, he may well have wanted Brady out of the way.
Now the thing about the Brady killing that there's a lot of controversy about it. For years, authors said that the 5 men, Brady and all of his deputies, 5 men were walking down to put a notice on the courthouse. And at that time, the courthouse was down by the Torreon. Well, 5 men to post up a notice with Winchesters? I don't think so. I think they were going down to that end of town to arrest McSween when he came in.
I also think that McSween, while he was a wimp, I think he was quite capable of ordering murders. And I think that he was one of the more villainous characters in the war. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but I really do think that. I think that the war probably wouldn't have gotten as far as it did, as quickly as it did, if McSween had not gotten those constable badges for Brewer and the others, and then worked on Brewer's feelings of guilt for having abandoned Tunstall to send them out. I think that McSween really was the power behind all of them. I think he instigated a lot.
My hunch is that these guys probably acted on their own. I don't think they were coerced into it by Chisholm or McSween. I think there's some hotheads. Once again, here we add this into this equation. Some guys who are itching for a fight regardless.
On the morning of April 1st, 6 regulators, including Billy Bonney, positioned themselves behind an adobe wall to the east of the Tunstall store. Sheriff Brady, along with Billy Matthews, Deputy George Heineman, George Pepin, and John Long, were walking down Lincoln's Main Street past the Tunstall store. When the Brady party drew even with the adobe wall, the regulators opened fire with their Winchesters. Sheriff William Brady died with more than a dozen bullets in his body. Deputy George Heineman was also killed. The regulators left town, considering their ambush and murder of Brady a great victory for the McSween forces. But whatever led to Brady's killing, whether it was McSween's wishes or a regulator plan, it backfired. Gunning down a lawman who was respected in the community turned many people against the McSween cause. Now both sides in the conflict were looked upon as equally murderous.
Sheriff Brady being shot in the street is exactly what it is. Sheriff Brady got shot in the street. That's murder. That had nothing to do with the law and order of any county anywhere. You know, if you had enough people that would say it's all right, still doesn't make it right. You know, he was murdered.
If you really like the McSween faction, you can read Protection in McSween here, that they felt that Brady was headed down to assassinate both McSween and Chisholm as they arrived in town, that they were never going to get their day in court. If you don't, you can read into it, a malicious, premeditated murder in the streets of Lincoln. The truth is probably somewhere in between.
In a nutshell, I think John Chisholm was behind it. I think Billy the Kid fingered him as the one that got him into trouble and wouldn't help him out. That's to quote Billy the Kid himself.
I think there was no avoiding it. That was the only possible way that that you could have taken any one of the faction out, because the law at that time showed favoritism for or against. And if you wasn't on sight of the sheriff, he was out of luck, so that was the only possible move that they had.
My opinion is it was an opportunity and they took it. It's also probably the most indefensible act by the kid. It was an assassination.
I think that the people that were responsible for the killing of Brady did not look at their act as cowardly. I think they thought it was a good tactic of war, guerrilla warfare.
Dr. Joseph Blazer, a former dentist, made his home and ran a sawmill on the northern bank of the Upper Tularosa River. Over the course of a decade, Blazer became a well-respected man in his small New Mexican community.
He went into Mexico and picked up a load of corn to deliver to Fort Stanton. And it was on his trek to Fort Stanton from El Paso, he came through the Tularosa Canyon and came by this site where the Blazer Mill is now. At that time, it was known as El Maquino, and the mill. And he liked it and got to talk and trade with the fellows that owned it, and he traded his wagon train and I guess some money, but he bought a half interest in the place. Well, I guess one of the main reasons he did that, he had a son, Almer, that was in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and he had TB. And the doctors had told him if they'd get him out of that climate and into a high, dry climate, there was a good chance that he would live another 4 or 5 years. And from that day on, he began to recover.
On April 4th, 1878, a man named Andrew Buckshot Roberts headed toward Dr. Blazer's mill on his mule. A former buffalo hunter, Roberts was a Dolan employee who had ridden with the posse to the Rio Feliz the month before. Although Roberts had no active part in Tunstall's slaying, as a member of the posse, the regulators held a murder warrant with Buckshot's name on it. Roberts, however, wanted no part in the troubles in Lincoln County. He had sold his ranch to a party in Santa Fe and was on his way to Blazer's mill to pick up his check for the sale. When Roberts got to the mill on the morning of April 4th, Dr. Blazer advised him to leave. An Indian had informed Blazer that a group of regulators was headed to the mill. Roberts left, and as he did, he spotted the regulators approaching. But he also saw the mail carrier. When the regulators arrived at the mill, they put their horses in a high-sided corral, which hid them from view, and went inside Blazer's home to have some breakfast. Roberts scouted the mill from a distance, and not seeing the regulator mounts, assumed that they had passed it by. Buckshot rode up to the mill and removed his 6-shooter, respecting a rule Blazer had about bringing no sidearms into the house. Roberts did, however, carry his Winchester carbine. As he approached the door, regulator Frank Coe emerged, and only then did Buckshot realize his blunder. Coe tried for a half an hour to talk Roberts into surrendering, but the old buffalo hunter would have none of it. Suddenly, Charlie Beaudry, backed by John Middleton and George Coe, emerged from the house with Beaudry demanding Roberts surrender. "No," Buckshot replied, and brought up his Winchester. Charlie Beaudry drew his weapon and fired. Buckshot also fired. Roberts was hit in the stomach. Beaudry was hit in the belt buckle, which saved his life. Roberts continued pumping shots from his Winchester. He seriously wounded 2 regulators. As Roberts fired, he backed into the doorway of Dr. Blazer's office and barricaded the door with a mattress. Buckshot was mortally wounded and out of ammunition. Billy the Kid made a dash for the door and thrust his Winchester at Roberts. At the same time, Buckshot rammed the barrel of his empty gun into the Kid's gut, causing Billy's shot to miss. The Kid retreated. Inside the office, Roberts found a single-shot Springfield rifle and a box of cartridges. He loaded the rifle and settled in behind the mattress. Meanwhile, Regulator Captain Dick Brewer had taken up a position behind a pile of logs about 125 yards west of the house. Brewer aimed carefully and fired. His bullet smashed into the wall behind Buckshot. Roberts saw the smoke from Brewer's shot rising from the log pile and sighted the Springfield on the log where the smoke had risen. As soon as Brewer's head appeared, Roberts fired. The bullet entered Brewer's left eye and blew out the back of his skull. Upon losing their captain, the regulators wanted no more of Buckshot Roberts and retreated. The next day, Roberts died of his wound. Although the regulators had succeeded in killing Roberts, they had lost their leader and 2 men had been seriously wounded.